the AP was in northern Gaza, and they were just giving a long-standing video feed of northern Gaza. And all of a sudden, Israel shows up, the Israeli government shows up and tries, no, they don't try to take, they actively take their footage. Look at this. This is not like a hypothetical anymore. This is not a dress rehearsal. They literally rolled up and took the Associated Press's equipment, their cameras. They took it because they said that they were violating the law, Now, you may say, well, what law could they possibly be violating? It's a good question. It's a good question. The law is called the Foreign Press Law. Now, the Foreign Press Law is a law that was, I guess, ratified, signed into effect a couple weeks ago. And it basically is a law that was designed intentionally and explicitly to ban Al Jazeera from Israel. That's all it was about. But the Foreign Press Law is a law that is designed to ban any kind of media that has a danger to the country. Any kind of law that causes problems, any kind of law that produces incitement. This is the language they're using, right? And so they show up. The Israeli government says the Associated Press is creating incitement. They're doing harm to the security of the government. So they take the camera, they take a tripod, they take a modem, and they take 2 microphones. And according to the Ministry of Communication, they said that the film that was shot of northern Gaza is a problem because it was being fed to Al Jazeera. Again, they're not unclear. This is all about Netanyahu's beef with Al Jazeera. They said, we're going to take you off the air because your feed is going to Al Jazeera. Now, let's be clear. The Associated Press is not giving all of their footage or sharing footage. It doesn't even have a business relationship exclusively with Al Jazeera. What they're doing is, again, they're sharing a shot. So in other words, the Associated Press shows up, they take a picture or they film video of a scene, and they share that scene to Al Jazeera. They share it maybe to potentially NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, VOX, Vox. They could be sending it to News Nation. They could be sending it to the UK. They could be sending it to places like the BBC. They're simply sharing the footage. But because they didn't cut off Al Jazeera, they're saying that now Al Jazeera has access to state security issues, specifically that because in the footage you could, in theory, see the IDF forces. Now they're making it seem as if the Associated Press is trying to undermine the safety of Israeli soldiers. So the Associated Press, of course, said this is bullshit. They didn't use that language. They're much more sophisticated and polished than I am. But they said this is bullshit. They said that they have been, I'll read you their statement. They said, we have complied with Israel's military censorship rules by not reporting details about troop movements that could endanger soldiers. However, the wire service noted its live shot of Gaza generally showed little more than, quote, smoke rising over the territories. All you saw was smoke. But Israel is not saying this because they actually think their troops are in danger. They don't think that. What they think is that they can pressure the international media community to shut Al Jazeera out. Full disclosure for anybody watching doesn't know this, I work for Al Jazeera. I am the host of a show on Al Jazeera called Upfront. You should watch it. It's on Friday nights. Extra plug there. But this isn't about that, but I just want to be clear for ethical, journalistic transparency purposes. I do work at Al Jazeera. But Al Jazeera is not doing anything to merit this kind of response. What they don't like is the fact that Al Jazeera every single day reports on the war on Gaza. That Al Jazeera every single day shows where the bodies are buried. That literally, when you look at the live graves at Al-Shifa and Al-Nasser Hospital, Al Jazeera does not accept the Hezbollah Israeli propaganda stories and lies and talking points. Al Jazeera pushes back. They're not the only ones, but Al Jazeera has consistently been a thorn in the side of Netanyahu and the Netanyahu government. And so he is especially targeting and focused upon Al Jazeera and anybody else connected to Al Jazeera. This is all that this is about, right? And that's why back last month, the Knesset, Israeli lawmakers, they voted 71-10. This was not a close call to give Netanyahu and his government the ability to ban Al Jazeera in Israel. Now, Netanyahu doesn't get that much love and support from anybody. He barely has a coalition at this point. But he was able to convince people that Al Jazeera was a threat. So what they do, they kicked Al Jazeera out of the country. Now, to be clear, we're still in the West Bank. I'm saying we because I work there. Al Jazeera is still in the West Bank. Al Jazeera is still in Gaza. Al Jazeera, I believe, is still in Jerusalem. No, actually, we're not in Jerusalem either because Israel acts as if Jerusalem is theirs, right, as opposed to contested territory. So the Jerusalem bureau is in Amman now, but you still have the West Bank in Gaza. So this is not a small thing. That's the story, right? That's the breakdown. But again, here in Night School, we don't just give you the news. This ain't a news station. I want to also explain to you why this is a big deal. Israel is waging complete war on the media. Since October 7th, Israel has killed more than 100 journalists. That alone is a crisis. That alone is a crisis. 100 Palestinian journalists have been killed. 2 Israeli, 3 Lebanese. And I'm not talking about the ones that are injured or missing. Israel is waging war on the media. Both Egypt and Israel at this point have banned journalists from entering the Gaza Strip, foreign journalists. So you can't enter from the outside. They kill you when you're on the inside. This is a war on the media. And then the mainstream media outlets, they're being fed lies. And the people who push back against the lies, they're being kicked out of the country. This is the war. Now, what's making this even more interesting and complicated is the fact that Al Jazeera is sponsored by who? Qatar. Qatar is a country that has been actively engaged in ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. So this is super complicated, right? It's complicated. On the one hand, Hamas and Israel are having a negotiation brokered by Qatar, and Israel's downfall, and Qatar has been helpful. You can think what you want about Israel. You can think what you want about Hamas. You can think what you want about Al Jazeera. What we know for sure is the negotiations have been advanced because of the actions of, in part, of Qatar. That is just a fact. So when you have that as your circumstance, it makes you wonder, again, what is the end goal here? What is the end game here for Israel? What are they trying to do? When they get to the point where they're banning the Associated Press. Now, this is how bad it was. The international community stood up and said, yo, enough. The international community said, you cannot continue to do this. Today, even the White House stood up. Now, you know it's bad when the White House says, hey, we are concerned, because the White House ain't concerned about nothing when it comes to Israel, right? In terms of holding Israel accountable, right? They said, look, cool story, bro, right? You're saying that the reason that you did this is because of security concerns, but let's look at the so-called security concern here, right? Look at it. Look at it. This is what the shot was showing. Because I want y'all to understand here with context. This is what the shot demonstrated. You see smoke coming out of buildings. You see some buildings. You don't see one soldier in this image. Show me a soldier. Show me a soldier. And they were trying to say that this shot compromises the safety and the integrity of the Israeli military, that troop movements are being compromised here, that you can see where the IDF soldiers are. Where? You don't see one of them. But we know that's not what it's about. That's never what it was about. It was never about the soldiers. It was never about the soldiers. It was about making it clear, making it very clear that any media outlet that challenges Israel, that doesn't buy the state narrative, that doesn't stand up and just take it, right? That they are going to be a problem. And this is the challenge. This is the crisis, I think, of the media right now for the state of Israel. Anyway, I won't belabor the point, but it is a deep problem. It's so bad, because I got to tell you the end of this, that they reversed course. They gave the equipment back. They said they've thought about it. The Minister of Communications said, we're going to give the equipment back. Why? Because even America, even the White House said we're concerned about this. When the White House says they're concerned, you got to calibrate your understanding, right? If the White House says we don't care, it means they might care. If they say we care, it means they're upset. If they say we're very concerned or we're troubled, it means they are furious. But they'll never stand up publicly and say that against Israel. And so when the White House publicly says we are troubled and concerned by what they did to the Associated Press, that's a very slippery slope. That's a very dangerous precedent to say. Now you're going to take people's equipment because you saw some smoke coming out of a tower, or because they didn't agree to your internal country's law about sharing footage with Al Jazeera. Please understand that the stakes are very high here in Israel, in the United States, when it comes to media freedom. We see our media freedom being compromised here, but we absolutely see it compromised over there. And while Israel constantly claims that it is the only democracy in the Middle East, and get what they tell you? We're the only democracy in the Middle East. That's all we keep hearing. If they're the only democracy in the Middle East, why are we seeing such anti-democratic practices happening? And it's only when the world says something, it's only when the world stands up and says, wait a minute, what are you doing? When they get caught with their hands down, when they get caught with their pants down, rather, that's the only time they act, which means we have to be vigilant. That means we have to be media watchdogs. We have to be vigorously policing them. And I don't like that language of policing. We have to be vigilantly monitoring what they're doing.